City Council meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone, and let the roll reflect that a majority of the members are here for a quorum with the absence of Councilmember Lund. Tonight we have a recognition of an outgoing commissioner, Victoria Baukol, and we, one more time? Baukol. Okay, thank you. And we appreciate the commissioners' members and all that they have done for our commissions in the past and in the present. And so with us, we have Chief Townsend, and you can do an introduction.
Victoria, if you want to step up. Victoria Baukol began serving on the Public Safety Advisory Commission in January 1st of 2022, and she's been serving since then, with her last meeting being in June. Victoria, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you ask, is moving out of the city of Hastings and will not be able to serve any longer for this reason. She's been instrumental with planning for National Night Out, the Hastings Police Department Open House, the Fire Department Open House, and in many other events in the city. She is also very instrumental in the many THC discussions that took place in the Public Safety Advisory Commission meetings. And we wish her the very best and enjoy the future. And thank you very much for your service to the city of Hastings, and thank you for your time that you gave to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's not, okay. Thank you for your service. Council members, are there any corrections to the minutes from the workshop or the regular meeting from June 5th? Oh, sorry. Okay. Also tonight, we have a proclamation for the Parks and Recreation Month. And Councilmember Pemble, if you would start, please.
Certainly. Whereas park and recreation are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the city of Hastings, and
whereas parks and recreation promote health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks, and
whereas parks and recreation encourage physical activities by providing space for popular sports and hiking trails and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles, and
whereas Parks and Recreation staff members maintain nearly 30 miles of trails and 37 parks for our community, along with the Hastings Civic Arena, the Hastings Family Aquatic Center, our fields, courts, and playgrounds, and
whereas Parks and Recreation programming and education activities such as youth and adult athletic leagues provide opportunities to engage with others in the community, and
whereas parks and recreation provide numerous entertainment opportunities that take advantage of our natural amenities and support tourism throughout the use of Levy Park and other parks, and
whereas parks and recreation take care of the trees in our city and work to ensure the ecological beauty of our community, and
whereas each July, the city celebrates National Parks and Recreation Month with a party in the park, which will be held this year on July 11th at Levy Park, and
whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and
whereas the city of Hastings recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources, and
Now therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor Mary Fassbender, and the Hastings City Council hereby declare the month of July 2023 as Parks and Recreation Month in the city of Hastings. And just a shout out to our Parks Director and all his staff for all they have done for our community and keeping our parks healthy and safe, and all the people that enjoy our parks. So, Tonight we have comments from the audience. If anyone is in the audience that would like to speak to the council at this time. Or anyone on Zoom? No one on Zoom. Okay. All right, council members, we received notice of Councilmember Lunn's resignation effective July 10th. I'd like to add a resolution accepting the resignation and declaring a vacancy to the agenda. Councilmember Fox, Councilmember Fulch, any discussion? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. And that motion prevails, and we'll talk about it later. Thank you. Council, I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Councilmember Leifeld, Councilmember Pemble. Discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion, state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Tonight, we have a presentation and approval of the 2022 Comprehensive Financial Report. And for an introduction, we have City Finance Manager Chris Edemiller here, and a presentation by Nancy Schulzenberg of Bergen KDV. Welcome to you both.
Okay. Well, going on several years now, Bergen has done the audit here for the city, and we have just wrapped up the 22 audits, and we'll go through all the high points and all the fun here with Nancy.
All right, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council and administration. Thank you for giving me some time to go over these results this evening. I want to start out tonight by talking about the several pieces of communication that we issue as part of our audit. The first and most important communication is the independent auditor's report, and this you will find housed in the front of that annual financial report, so the largest of the documents. And it talks about responsibilities for the financial statements, talks about a little bit of detail about what we do as auditors and how we perform our audit and the things that we keep in mind. And the most important thing is the opinion. And we are issuing an unmodified opinion on the financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2022, based on the results of our audit. So basically an indication that everything is fairly stated. In addition to that independent auditor's report, we have a couple of other communications that we issue, and the next one is our report on government auditing standards. These standards are required because of some of the funding that you receive, and it requires us as your auditors to take a closer look at internal control and also compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, grants, other matters. And based on that, we had one internal control finding. We had a couple of material audit adjustments that we completed as part of the audit so that the financial statements would be fairly stated. And then we had no instances of noncompliance that were noted as part of the procedures that we completed. And then our last official letter is our Minnesota Legal Compliance Report, and this comes to us right from the Office of the State Auditor. They compile a checklist that covers all of the categories of legal compliance and state statute that they ask us to look into as part of our audit and as those statutes relate to accounting matters. And based on our work there, no instances of noncompliance were noted either. So no compliance findings in any of the reports that we're issuing. And then we have our communication letter, and this is a separate document, and it has several pieces to it. First of all, required communication, and these are things that are just that. They're required by our standards that we put in writing to you all as the governing body for the city of Hastings. And it would be our tool if we had anything significant that we noted, anything unusual that we uncovered, any disagreements or difficulties encountered, and happy to report that we had none of that. So that section of the letter really does not stray from our standard language. Then we have financial analysis, which I will cover this evening. And then finally, in the back, there are some emerging issues. So the GASB has been working hard, as always, and there are 3 new standards coming up in the next several years. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, it's in the back of that document for your reading pleasure. Moving then to financial analysis, we're going to start with the general fund, and the chart that you see here is the overall fund balance of the general fund. So you've seen some nice improvements in that fund balance, and for 2022, it was up about 12.5% or just under 1.2 million. When we look at the categories, there are 3 presented there. First of all, on the top, the skinny orange line is your non-spendable. Those are items that have already been paid for the fiscal 23 year. Right below that, you'll see a restriction. Those are amounts that have come into the city with a spending tag on them. So they're set aside for a specific purpose. And then below that, you have your unassigned number, which is about 10.2 million at the end of the year and represents 63%, almost 64% of next year's expenditure budget. You have enacted a policy that recommends a level of 35 to 45% of that. So you are in excess of that at the end of the year and in sound financial health. Taking a look at some of the details then in the general fund, we have 2 pie charts that take a look at your revenues, and you can see by just looking at the visual picture that your sources of revenue are fairly consistent year over year. That taxes and assessments makes up the most of the revenue that you receive in the general fund and stayed very consistent at 67% for 21 and 22. A couple of variations in the other categories, and we'll get into the details of the dollar of that, but a slight shift from intergovernmental revenues to charges for services and licenses and permits between the 2 years. And when we look at those amounts in dollars, that's what you see on this chart. And so we have bar graphs for each of the categories. Overall, revenues were up just 1.7%, so pretty close to where you were at the 2021 levels. Several categories have changed there, though, to point out. First of all, on the far left, taxes and assessments, up about $223,000 related to an increase in the levy. Right next to that, you have licenses and permits, and 2 over from that, you have charges for services. Both of those had to do with the development that was going on in the city. So you had increased building permits, and you also had increased building inspection charges for services. And then you had a category, the intergovernmental category, that decreased substantially, and that had to do with the use of your MSA funds and also the Highway 316 project that occurred in 2021 that did not repeat in 2022. Switching gears then to the expenditures of the general fund, and again, very similar pie. When you look at the 2 years presented, you did have a decrease in the capital outlay, causing all of the other categories to shift just a bit. And when we take those and equate them to dollars, expenditures were up about $408,000 overall. And again, some fluctuations between categories. On the far left, your general government up about $326,000 related to repairs and maintenance and also a clerk position for the year. Right next to that, your public safety up about $460,000 related to step and lane increases, building inspection salaries, and also just hours worked in that category. And then public works also up about $163,000. You had some storage rental when the new public works building was being constructed, so increased cost there. And if you go to the far right, you'll see that decrease in the capital outlay, a lot having to do with the Highway 316 project that happened in 2021. So you see that on both sides, revenue and expenditure in the general fund. Now, the next slide takes a look at the budget to actual. So you'll see the final budget. That is the plan that the city enacted, you all approved for the year. In the middle, you have your actual results, and then on the far right, you have those variance columns. So if we look at the far right, revenues under budget by about 14.8%. The largest category being that intergovernmental category, and that had to do with planning to use more MSA funds and the ARPA dollars in 2022, and that didn't happen. On the expenditure side of things, those were under budget about 23.4%. So you can see that under on both sides. And the largest reason for the expenditure variance is also the MSA and ARPA dollars in that capital outlay line. So you see that being the most significantly under budget. Other categories relatively consistent with the budget and overall conservative budgeting for the city. Couple special revenue funds to note. First of all, your fire and ambulance funds. Revenue's pretty stable from year over year. Expenditures up about $354,000 related to a fire inspector position that was added in 2022, and then also overall repairs and maintenance. So fund balance in this fund did decrease pretty substantially, dropping about half, or about $655,000 for the year. And then Parks and Recreation, significant change from 21 to 22, a big jump in the revenues with some park dedication fees that occurred in the year, and then also the levy allocation for that fund. Expenditures up as well, but not as much as the revenues. You had a parks keeper position and also some basketball court repairs that occurred in 2022. Overall fund balance in this fund up about 27% or $438,000. And then moving on to the 4 enterprise funds. And before I get into the detail of these, I just want to note that all of the funds operated positively and all of them have a positive position at the end of the year. So it appears that fees being charged are appropriately covering operating costs. So when we look at the water fund, first of all, revenues up about $400,000 or 14.7%. You had increased connection charges with the development that occurred, and that was offset by a decrease in usage for the year with the water ban that happened in 2021. Expenses actually down in this fund about 4.7%, and that is again related to the Highway 316 project that happened in 2021. So $944,000 of depreciation being covered by those charges for services. So we present operating income both ways because a lot of cities are covering a portion of their depreciation. You are covering all of your depreciation, so saving some funds for future costs in the enterprise funds. Sewer fund, a positive picture here as well. Revenues up about 9.6%, having a lot to do with the sewer connection charges. So again, with that development that occurred in the city. Expenses up about 4.9% with some increased fees from the Met Council that occurred in 2022. Stormwater fund. This is one that a lot of cities struggle with maintaining a positive balance. So this is good to see. Your revenues were up about 5.4%, expenses up about 23%. A lot of that had to do with that pension adjustment. So if you recall, the pension is allocated out across the state by all participants and you get your proportionate share. And just based on the activity and the salaries in this fund, it had an unusually larger proportionate share. So you had an increase in the cost. And then finally, your hydro fund. 2 years of positive operations for this fund after struggling a bit previously. So revenues up about 16.1%, expenses up about 14.9%. So again, covering depreciation and allowing for positive operations for 2022. Then we have 2 charts to take a look at the tax capacity, levy, and rates. The first one is your tax capacity rate, and you can see the relative consistency over all 5 years. Did jump up a little bit in 2022 with an increase in the levy. And if we look at the next slide, you can see those changes. So the tax capacity is on the right-hand side, the tax levy is on the left. Your capacity went up 3.4% in 2022, the levy up 6.4%, again creating that small increase in the overall rate for the year. And that is the information I have. Any questions or comments or anything you'd like more detail on?
Thank you. Any questions, council? Okay. If not, I would accept a motion to accept the 2022 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Councilmember Fox and Councilmember House. Any discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion, state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thank you again.
Yep, thank you.
Tonight we have a new massage establishment, View Beauty Studio at 112 2nd Street East, and we will have a public hearing with a resolution. And for this information, the introduction will be done by Assistant City Administrator Kelly Murtaugh. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Your Honor. Council members, in your packet was materials related to the View Beauty Studio, which is located at 112 2nd Street East, and they are seeking a massage therapy establishment license for this 3-year period, 23, 24, 25. It does require a public hearing, which the mayor mentioned, and we can do that yet this evening. A notice was delivered to property owners and occupants within 350 feet. No public comments have been received at this time. So I'm happy to address any questions, or you may hold the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience to speak to this new addition to the View? Anyone on Zoom? No one on Zoom? Anyone wish to speak at this time? Okay, at this time, I will close the public hearing and council discussion. Any discussion? Okay, then I would accept a motion to approve the resolution approving a new massage therapy establishment licensed for the View Beauty Studio on 112 East 2nd Street. Councilmember House.
Second.
Councilmember Pemble. Any other discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Tonight, we are awarding a contract for energy savings contract with Apex Facility Solutions, LLC, and we will have an introduction by City Administrator Dan Waticha.
Thank you. First, want to comment that under the statute that this is related to, there is not a public hearing, but following the statute, we did post notice of the topic, including the name of the contractor and the purpose of the contract. Excuse me. We're proposing to use, I'm going to back up before I talk about what we're proposing to do. We've been talking for several years, and I think it's picked up over the last couple of months, about planning for the refrigeration and West Rink roof at the Civic Arena next year. Those projects we propose working with Apex Facility Solutions as the architect engineers, as well as a role in construction management as we get to those individual pieces to it. And that's really what this contract is about, is working with Apex on that design, engineering, as well as later the construction management. Because it's, we're some long lead times for some of the equipment, as well as just the time to design it, as well as trying to hit a very small window for construction next summer in between the ice seasons. We're working some of the design as we go. I don't know if it's the right way to put it, but we're designing the refrigeration, ordering the equipment for it, and then moving on to designing the roof before we put it out to bid. So we're trying to really compress that process. Instead of doing all the work up front and then on to step two, we've got it compressed and some of those phases working at the same time of each other. In any ways, the statute 471-345 subdivision 13, the key pieces to that are it's related to energy efficiency, which partly the greater efficiency of the refrigeration, the heat control related to the new roof and the ceiling underneath it, the addition of the solar panels, allows us to have that guaranteed energy aspect to it. But also, very importantly, that statute allows us to go out and seek qualified bids along each of those components, rather than the traditional bidding process that we might do for the entire project. So it gives us a little bit more control at these individual steps, working with qualified contractors rather than just whoever might submit. Still go through a bidding type process at each of those steps, getting prices from multiple contractors. But the other piece to it is, although there's a contract before you today, as we bring each of those future steps, so when we are ready to bring the purchase of the master control unit, which has got a year's lead time, so it's coming soon, or as we move to the roof design, we'll bring amendments to this contract at each step along the way. So a lot of lead in to This is a formal process. It's sort of the next step to effectuating what we've been talking about for several months about it's time to move forward with the arena's refrigeration and roof project next year. But this is the formality of getting the contractor on board, or at least that first initial contract, knowing that it'll have some amendments over the coming months. With that mouthful there, I can certainly stand for any questions that council might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Council, any discussion? Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dan, what is the total value of the refrigeration unit within itself, just the replacement of that? I know that the entire project is $4.5 million for everything comprehensively, but I was just curious for the refrigeration, what is that?
I think the refrigeration itself was a high ones, close to under 2 million. I can verify a specific number, but off the top of my head, I think it was between 1.5 and 2.
So, I was a little, okay, first of all, my own personal bias is that I'm always a little skeptical of these kinds of arrangements with, for these energy savings, these types of contracts. And so I'm disappointed that none of the exhibits that were mentioned, that are referred to in the actual contract, were included, in particularly Exhibit D, which is the operating parameters and the utility savings calculation methods that show what the breakdown of guaranteed savings were supposed to be. That wasn't included in there, and so I think that that's really an important piece if you're asking for this kind of contract to move forward. And so I would like to see that. Otherwise, I'm always personally skeptical of these kinds of arrangements. And then what's my greatest concern is how it would work with the roofing systems. I've never seen an energy savings agreement like this brought forward for a roofing project. And so I get the change out of the controls for the refrigeration unit, and then the solar piece I can also understand may have a component to it, but I'm a little skeptical about that as well, because I think that things should be, I think that there should be personally a separation between who's doing the design and then competitively getting bids, because in here it references that the Apex will determine who are qualified vendors, and there's lots of qualified vendors, in particular when it comes to roofing systems, and it depends what kind of roofing system it is that you're going to put down and such. And so so I think that there is a lot that's being included within this contract that the devil's in the detail. It's like, I would really like to see, really what is it that they're proposing? What are their guaranteed savings? Because whenever you have this kind of situation where it is that they're controlling the design, then they can also create the design in such a way that they cherry pick, the vendors it is that they want to use as subs, to do the work. And then you're not necessarily getting, the best price. And so that's personally why I'm always really apprehensive about these kinds of arrangements. I've seen them in the past, but I've never actually seen the trigger pulled on one. And so so I have a lot of reservations on it. I'll be supportive of it for right now in regards to the refrigeration unit replacement, but I think that's maybe what the scope of work is for right now, but not seeing what the exhibits are, you can't really see what the scope of work it is that this is pertaining to, if you understand what I'm saying. So
Sure.
So if you could follow up and provide to us the exhibit so that we can see this. And so what I understand what you're saying is that when you get to the next stage, that would include the rest of the project, which would be the West Rink roofing system, and then eventually the solar arrays, correct? I mean, it's more of a phased approach, or what is it that is within the original scope of this particular contract?
The initial is the design for the refrigeration, the design work of it. The next phase would actually be the master control unit, part of the refrigeration. A subsequent phase would be the west rink roof. So yes, it's phased, but it's not the specific phases that I thought I heard you say. But yes, it is phased. And this initial one is the design of the refrigeration unit.
And then, so when you get to the next phase, quote unquote, you would bring it forward again as an amendment? And that would be on the consent agenda? I would ask that it actually be on the regular agenda, since the scope of work isn't included within this particular.
We can certainly make sure that all phases are brought in under the award of contracts. That'd be
Okay.
No problem.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Foltz. Councilmember Fox.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was actually going to bring up putting the next phases on the agendas moving forward and not on the consent agenda for those exact reasons. I like seeing a phased approach. I don't know why it feels right for this. I mean, it's a big project, and it's nice to see it moving forward as quickly as it already is. But it would be great to see the details as we do move forward. So I would like to echo that.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Fox. Any other discussion, council? If not, I would accept a motion to approve the Guaranteed Energy Savings Agreement with Apex Facility Solutions, LLC. Councilmember Pemble and a Councilmember Fox seconds. Additional discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Tonight, we have a vacation of easement, Leifeld, 1801 Chantry Trail. We have a public hearing and a resolution, and we will have an introduction by Community Development Director John Hinsman. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. So before us tonight is a public hearing and resolution to vacate a drainage and utility easement on Chantry Trail. You may be asking, where the heck is Chantry Trail? Because it really doesn't exist yet. It's General Sieben Drive, County Road 46. It's a private street just west of Rivershore Drive. It will house 3 residents as it was designed. What we're being asked tonight to do is to vacate the drainage and utility easement between these 2 lots, because the owner is planning on combining them into a single lot and to place the house somewhat in the middle. And so what we do with plats is we establish drainage and utility easements for the placement of utilities and drainage purposes on that. The purpose for why this was established is no longer necessary, because we will have a house there, and this will now serve as the extent of the property, and we do have adequate drainage and utility easements there. So we have made notification to utility companies to ensure that there was nothing that we had not foreseen within those easements. There is not. And we are holding a public hearing and taking action per our city charter here, which establishes the rules and regulations for vacation of easement. So, Mayor and Council, we are recommending approval of this, subject to the conditions within the resolution. This is a public hearing. You may hold that at this time, or I can stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. At this time, I will open the public hearing to speak to 1801 Chantry Trail easement. Anyone wishing to speak at this time? No one on Zoom? Anyone wish to speak at this time for the easement on 1801 Chantry Trail? Okay, at this time, I will close the public hearing and open the discussion for council. Any discussion, council? Okay, Councilmember Leifeld?
Motion to approve.
Okay. Okay, Councilmember Fox, seconds. Any additional discussion? Council? Okay, all those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Tonight we have to authorize signature building inspection services for Dunn Solutions. And in an introduction, we'll continue with Community Development Director John Hinsman.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. As you think you are aware, our building official, Travis Dunn, has submitted his resignation to the city effective July 3rd. With Travis's departure comes a need for certain plan review and inspection services in his departure. Travis has submitted a contract here by his company, Dunn Solutions LLC, that would perform certain building inspection and review services during an interim period. The terms of the contract would be up to 6 months, and they would be directed by myself for specific services. I anticipate those services to be under one of two categories: one, plan review services, and two, building inspection services. So the contract and the rates before you are within the packet itself. We are recommending approval of that contract, finding the need to continue with those services on a limited basis as we transition into the new building official, and to make sure that we have someone who has been qualified in working on some of these larger projects to continue having an eye over that. So I can stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Council discussion. Okay, Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, it's disappointing that Travis is resigning from his position. We had a lot of discussion about increasing his pay scale, you know, to keep him on in the last year, I believe. It's very recent that we had those conversations. And so it's one of building inspectors, I'm told, are, you know, very in demand, and that what we're seeing is oftentimes is that city wages aren't keeping up with what market conditions are, and so that they're able to go private sector like this and such. And so I just kind of, I wonder, you know, if there's the need to re-examine this particular position and what the compensation package is. I think that from my understanding, it's commonplace that a lot of cities are losing building inspectors, and that they're really hard, you know, to backfill and such. And so, I just wanted to, you know, provide support to the human resources function of the city, and if they, you know, need to look at this again. I don't want to see the city being in this particular circumstance where we are having to farm it out and have it, you know, contracted out through another private entity like this. And so I hope that we can find, you know, some kind of solution so that we can keep on a staff person, you know, and under your ranks, and because that's more cost effective for us to be doing that rather than him going private sector like that and being able to get a higher wage as an independent consultant. And so just, you know, food for thought. I think that this is really an interesting circumstance. We're most definitely not unique in what has happened here, but, you know, what is it that we can stop this from happening again in the future? So thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Additional discussion, Council? Okay, then I would accept a motion to authorize signature of the agreement for professional services with Dunn Solutions LLC. Councilmember Pemble? Councilmember Fulch? Any new discussion, Council? Okay, all those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thanks, John. Tonight, under Parks and Rec, we have the Lake Rebecca Park Redevelopment Project Management. And for this item, we will have an introduction by City Administrator Dan Waticha.
Thank you. As Council knows, last year we received $1 million in grant funding from the LCCMR, the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources, to redevelop Lake Rebecca Park, with emphasis focusing on habitat restoration and expansion, as well as some of the supporting infrastructure of the park, such as the parking lots, the boat launch, the trails through the park. But really the emphasis is on coming from the state's Natural Resources Fund, emphasis on passive recreation. We're not putting in zip lines or playgrounds or anything like that. Anyways, $1 million. We put out request for proposals for a project manager who will help with, in the next couple of months, putting out the next request for proposals for somebody to handle the master planning for the park improvements, work with the community, survey, focus groups, get input on how best we can utilize the park, what improvements are appropriate within the scope of habitat and passive recreation. And then this project manager will also handle the oversight, putting out to bid and oversight of the construction for moving dirt or whatever work might be needed to putting in those improvements, and being some fairly arcane state grant dollars, making sure we handle all the reporting requirements appropriately. We had 7 firms that we specifically reached out to when we were doing this RFP. 3 responded, and HKGI is the low bid. We've done work with them in the past on the People Movement Plan, for example, and recommend that we engage them for this project management aspect. With that, I can take questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Council discussion. Councilmember Fulch?
Thank you. Dan, I was wondering, as just, reading through this, this project proposal real quick from HJKDI, something that I personally have been really concerned about as we're moving forward with the Lake Rebecca project and what it is we're going to do down there is the impact of global climate change and what the predictions are, regarding the what we're going to see with precipitation levels, and how I have a emergency management certification, and when I had gone to FEMA training, they had said that what has been the 500-year flood will become the 100-year flood, and what has been the 100-year flood will become the 10-year flood in the decades to come. And so I just always have a lot of just like stomach ache about us pouring a lot of money into Lake Rebecca, just because knowing that there's going to be so many fluctuations in what it is that we could see with flooding coming down the river and such. And I think everyone here on the council is a lifelong resident, and so we know the history of how the river's impacted Lake Rebecca and such. And so I didn't see in this, just perusing it, that they're going to be looking at environmental impact, and climate change as to what that really means, for the river impacting Lake Rebecca and such. And so I would just add that, as you're going forward with these discussions and planning, that really needs to be taken into, consideration as to, what are the projected impacts with flooding and how that's going to, impact this area and how it is that we use it into the future. And so I can't obviously ask for an amendment at this point, but I would most certainly hope that staff would have that at top of mind as we're moving forward in the planning process, so that we're not, making huge investments in the areas that will just get washed away in the next decade or two. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Any other, Councilmember Fox?
I'd like to move to approve sorry, I'm at the bottom of the document.
Okay.
Authorize staff.
Okay. Thank you. And a second by Councilmember Leifeld. New additional discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thank you, Dan. Tonight under community development, we have park dedication fees, and with an introduction by Community Development Director John Hansman.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, we're looking at a first reading of an ordinance amendment, and normally first readings are something we would place on the consent agenda, but wanted to bring this forward for your attention to highlight a little bit more about what we're doing with the changes here, because there could be some more significance, and wanted to ensure that if there's any questions that came forward tonight, that we'd have time to address those prior to the public hearing and the second reading final adoption, which would be scheduled for July 17th. So With that preamble, what we're doing tonight is looking at amending two pieces of city code related to parkland dedication. One would be Chapter 154, which is our subdivision code. The other one would be Chapter 34, which is our fees. You may go look at why is the subdivision code being amended for park dedication fees, and that's a fair question. Under state statutes, the ability for us to have parkland dedication derives from platting of land. We have the ability under state statutes to collect fees and/or land for park dedication purposes. So it's a creature of that ordinance. So I've been working with Chris Jenkins, our Parks and Recreation Director, because this is something that falls within both of our reviews on this. What we're doing right here is a couple of things. One is we're establishing a change within the ordinance itself. We're changing the methodology for the calculation of physical land dedication. We're increasing the fees for parkland dedication to reflect changes in the marketplace, and we're placing that specific fee for park dedication in the fee schedule. So those are the three things that we're accomplishing here. One of the things that I should note is with parkland dedication, we have not looked at any increases in fees for this ordinance in almost 20 years. In 2004 was the last time that the City Council raised park dedication fees. So we have recognized that there's a need to raise those fees when we take a look at the needs that we've established for park dedication, and also taking a look at what our neighbors are charging for park dedication. Found that what we're charging is certainly below what others are charging in here. The other thing that we're cognizant of is that parkland dedication fees are receiving a lot more notice and discretion by courts. And there has to be a nexus between the scrutiny of having fees and what's being charged and the burden to the city park system. There needs to be a connection between those. We just can't, we have to have create some sort of determination as to why we are charging the fees we are, and come up with some sort of rational determination of that. So what we've done is we've tried to do that within the code itself. What we've done is we've taken a look at what are we doing today. Today we have a population of about 23,000 people. We have a person per household of a little over 2.7, I believe, and we have about 700 acres of parkland. So we run a bunch of calculations based on that. We find that we are providing right now about 1,300 square feet per person in parkland throughout the city. Rationale going forward is that the number and figure we should be using for new dedication? So if we have this established for the existing population, that this is what we should be establishing for dedication as we move forward in the future. And so that's what we did within the ordinance amendment. We put this into code, and with the idea that some of these figures like population and people per household are going to change as we continue to move forward, which provides the necessity for us to look and amend that from time to time. Here's the issue that we came up with here. When we take a look at what this actually derives for park dedication, it's a substantial increase if we use this model. What I've done here is I've put a couple of subdivisions forward here. One, Heritage Ridge, which is 116 single-family and villa home units, and the other being Lake Isabel Flats and apartment complex. These are both two subdivisions that had to pay park dedication fees within the last couple of years. Under the existing regulations, Heritage Ridge paid $2,100 per unit. So if you take that by 116 units, they paid just under $250,000 for park dedication. Under this calculation we have under the subdivision code, that would go up substantially, about 70%, to about $5,100 per unit, or a total payment of about just under $600,000. A substantial increase about what we're doing today, and an increase above what comparable communities are charging for park dedication. When you take a look at apartments, that discrepancy becomes much more pronounced. Right now, we're charging less for apartment units, $1,100 per unit, so we had just under $100,000 for Lake Isabel. Under the code, we would have about $16,000 per unit, or about $1.4 million. So we're going up, over 15 times that number with this figure. So obviously, when we looked at this, we paused and went, this is not something that we can, I think, rationally bring forward, certainly with the apartment calculation, that this is something that is up and above, beyond what others are charging, and is going to be difficult for us to rationalize to the developers. And in a situation like this as well, park dedication fees are often going to be passed along as part of an increase within a home itself, and we're all cognizant of the price of homes. So what do we do from here? What we have the ability to do is we have the ability to establish a rational mechanism within our subdivision code, which we are doing. But we have the ability to establish rates and a park dedication fee that may be smaller than that. And that's what we're proposing to do. What we have here is our range. When we take a look at 25 cities that we looked at for park dedication fees, here's the median survey value that we saw. Basically, single family 3,600, townhome 35, apartment 35. The interesting thing about most cities compared to us is we have a 3-tier system for park dedication. Apartments are charged at half the rate as a single family home. In most of the other 20 out of 25 of the other cities we surveyed, they had a flat fee across the schedule. So what we're proposing is to move towards that. When you take a look at the range of what people are charging, it goes from about $1,500 to $8,000 in that area. What we're proposing is to do this, is to bring forward the increase to $3,600, which we determined to be the median survey value. This is 2021 numbers. And to do that over time by raising fees approximately $500 per unit per year until we get to $3,600. So if you take a look at the next column down here, which is low to mid density, less than 12 units per acre. Right now the existing fee is $2,200. We'd raise it up to $2,700 now, $32 and $24, $36 and $25. With our high density, we do the same thing over a longer period of time, going from $1,100 to $16, $21, and then by 2027 be at that $3,600 fee. So that is the rationale, or that is what we're proposing to bring forward for the actual fees. This is what would be adopted within the fee schedule itself under Chapter 34. You may ask the question as to, well, if we know the rationale that we're establishing derives fees that are substantially higher than we're going to support, why are we putting that into the code? And that's a fair question. We have to provide a rational nexus for how we are determining park dedication. We felt that this was the rational nexus. Whether that rational nexus is something that we would support charging individuals is a separate matter. And so we're distinguishing the two between what we have between the subdivision ordinance, which provides more of a legal cover, and Chapter 34 fees, which is what we're going to be charging. So this is an issue that has been talked substantially with our Park and Recreation Commission. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this at their previous meeting. And then we also had a meeting of the Finance Committee as well. Our Finance Committee meeting talked about trying to establish a fee that was someplace within the middle of what others were charging and to try to get there over a series of steps. So that's the rationale for what we're proposing tonight. So again, tonight, the only action that you have is to consider first reading and to order the public hearing. However, if you have any questions on direction, changes, other things that you'd like to see prior to the 17th, now would be a great time for that discussion. So I can stand for any questions.
Thank you, John. Councilmember Leifeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. John, so I was part of the meeting discussing all of this, and I love how you started out with the first slide. And $1.4 million is obviously ridiculous. When we look at what, say, that 89 unit example this year as opposed to when we implement this, from a 97,900,000, okay, would be 320,000 in this. Does that have any impact as far as you understand when we're looking at all these other communities on rent prices? So I know when we talk rent prices in Hastings and we look at, other areas where people are going instead of renting here, and we haven't had anything in years, it's been quite some time. for rentals. So now we've got this happening. What's this going to do, or what could this do to rent prices?
Sure. Council member, with rental prices or home prices, this is going to be an additional cost that's borne upon the subdivider of the property. So with most costs that they have, a portion of that is going to be likely passed on as part of the purchase price or part of the rental structure on that one. So that's a consideration for the council at this point. It's really a consideration between there is a need for park dedication fees to establish certain things and to dedicate land and provide services for the city. This is a mechanism in which you can have the cash paid to provide for that land and that development. It does come with a cost on it.
So then could an apartment building put in their own park?
Sure. With park dedication, there's two primary ways that we look at dedication requirements. One would be physical land. For an apartment complex, generally it's going to be on a small site. You're not going to have enough land to build a park there. So they're generally going to be the cash payment. On other subdivisions, we have a comprehensive plan that takes a look at park needs, and there's times in which we've established a need for a park within the plan, and a subdivision comes close to where we want that park, so we take land for the park. If that's not the case, we take the cash for it, and then when land comes available that we think is suitable, we buy the park at that point.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, John. Thank you for all the work that you've been doing on this, and in particular, Chris Jenkins I know he's done a lot of legwork as well, and so to give him a shout out and credit for all the good work that he's been doing to support our parks. And so something that I'm concerned about is not being in the situation again where we go 20 years without an adjustment to our parks dedication fee schedule. We have a huge gap that we need to fill in the upcoming 5 to 10 years for the parks. And so something I like about what it is that you're proposing is that it's basing it on the fair market value of land within our community and such, and that you're using best practices that are suggested by the League of Minnesota Cities for us to be doing these calculations and such. But as I'm reading the ordinance, I didn't see in there, like verbiage about how often it is that we're going to reestablish what the fair market value is. When we were in conversation, I know Chris had said something maybe about like every 3 years we'd go through that exercise. I just want to make sure that we are being very clear about how often it is that we're going back and going through that exercise to increase our fee structure. And I would be all for doing it every year to make sure that we're keeping up so that we don't have a gap. But so and I know we have Attorney Land here, and so if someone could help point that out, or how it is that we can institutionalize that we're regularly keeping these fees up with what the market conditions are at the time.
Sure. And council member, with under 15407-4B, we have, it's kind of hidden in here. It's fair market value. We have an assessment of what that is. And what we're requiring in there is that a certified appraisal is obtained at least every 3 years, and for each residential classification. So we're looking at updating this, having a check back at least every 3 years on this one to avoid a situation of having 20 years go by.
Okay, and so that was actually in the ordinance?
It is.
And I didn't see it hiding?
It's a hidden thing.
Okay, and so I guess my next question is about the math, the formula that you were using, because when you went through the exercise and you showed us what it is that we could be theoretically charging if we followed best practices, which you showed as the first example, which was substantially higher than it was the $5,000 level rather than the $3,000 level. Did you adjust the formula? Is that in the ordinance then, so that we're consistent in how it is that we're applying the formula then 3 years from now?
Sure. Within the ordinance itself is this formula and what it derives. We didn't make any adjustments to this within the code. What we do say within the code is that we can take this calculation or something that is less than that we would have within the fee schedule. And I'm kind of paraphrasing that a little bit, but we do make that declaration within the ordinance that here is the way that we are rationalizing how park dedication can be established. We can use this formula, or we can use a lesser number that's established within the fee schedule itself.
Okay, so what I heard you say is that we will for sure in 3 years go back and have a revaluation of the fair market value, but it's discretionary as to what formula it is that we're going to be utilizing at that time?
We're obligated, sorry, Councilmember, we're obligated under the ordinance to revise the fair market value every 3 years and to look at these units of measure that we've established within the code. So we have that there. The other thing that we have and that we will do a better job at is the fee schedule. Now, on the fee schedule itself, it's something that the council updates annually. And it's something that we'll take a look at on a more regular basis, at least every 3 years, to look at how the fees we're establishing compared to others and whether there needs to be an adjustment.
Okay, so it could be perhaps more in 3 years.
Correct.
Okay, it'll be discretionary at the time of the conditions. Okay, that makes sense to me. Good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Additional discussion, Council? Councilmember Fox?
To consider the first readings of both of these codes, city codes.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Fox. And a second by Councilmember Leifeld. New discussion, Council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
And you may also speak on the Dakota County Law Enforcement expansion at 1580 Highway 55.
Thank you, Mayor. Site plan before us tonight, resolution for your approval, approving about a 13,000 square foot addition and parking lot relocation to the Dakota County Law Enforcement Center. So I think we all know where Dakota County is, 55 General Sieben Drive. This is towards the rear of the facility with most things being visible from 4th Street. This gives a picture of what it looks like today and where the addition would be. You can tell 4th Street's a little bit lower in elevation. You've got an existing parking lot here which will be reconfigured. They're going to be putting on a 30 cell block units for detention housing as well as support programming and reconfiguring the parking lot. So this gives a better idea of what's going to be happening here. This is the edge of the existing building as you're looking north towards 4th Street. The existing parking lot is somewhat in this location. 30 cell block unit constructed over here. Parking lot relocated a little bit closer to 4th Street and utilizing the same existing entrances that come in here, and then a landscape buffer that's constructed between the parking lot here and 4th Street. So we did have the Planning Commission review this at their June 12th meeting. They did vote unanimously to recommend approval as presented here with some discussion on parking and building design. So I could stand for any questions, and I believe we do have some representatives from Dakota County present and the design firm if you have any questions for them.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, John. Council, any questions? Councilmember Fulch?
From an aesthetic perspective, I've noticed that, you know, obviously going up to 4th Street, both my kids were in high school, and so it's one of the main thoroughfares to go up to the high school. And I always, you know, was kind of like, oh God, poor kids have to go past the jail every day on their way to school. And so can you talk a little bit more specifically about the aesthetics of the exterior of the building? You know, like that area up there has high impact to our youth, and then also the commercial development for the Walmart area, and up, you know, there's a little strip mall and up there and such. And so I just want to really make sure that this is aesthetically not, Dungeons and Drear and it looks, awful, because currently when you drive past it, it's like, holy crap, you can see all of the cameras and it just doom and gloom when I go past it. That's all I think. And so what efforts are being done to make this more aesthetically pleasing for the public as they go past it?
Sure. Council member, this is the elevation here of what the building construction would be, and it was designed to match existing building materials within the existing county building. So mostly combinations of different color brick that are shown here. There is some window area that comes in within this location, but obviously being the type of facility there is a lot of security necessary within the facility itself. So I would say that the materials are going to match what the existing facility is as far as that goes. There's going to be some landscaping that's along the parking lot that you kind of have a weird view of the building at that point because the parking lot sits about 20 feet up. So the landscaping we have at the parking lot's going to be more pronounced than you would normally just because you're looking at it at a bigger angle. It'll have more an effect than it would be at grade. So you'll have some diffusion on that one, but when we take a look at architectural standards, we take a look at building additions to ensure that the materials match the building, and that's what this one does here.
Sure. Just to go on, I understand that. I would really hope that the county is doing a better job than to put up, shrubs and, greenery that would be more, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the words, like those kinds of, those tall, stoic shrubs that grow upwards.
Arbories?
Arboretums or whatever they are.
Arborvitaes, yeah.
So that to block that view, and, just anything to make it. I just think that this is a very delicate area of our community where we're trying to do a lot of commercial development and such, and to have the prison right there. It's that, okay, well, if it's there, then let's shield it a little bit, let's green it up so that it just doesn't have such a negative impact onto not only, the commercial development, but then also there's all of those, there's townhomes that are over there and some really nice neighborhoods. And so if there's folks that are from the county here, I would please do a nice job of at least greening it up so that it doesn't look so sterile and institutional and, for the public that's driving past it. I think that would be, I think it's the least that we could ask at this point for the use of that particular facility. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Councilmember Leifeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to to grant the site plan approval at 1590 Highway 55.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Leifeld. Councilmember Fox?
I will second, and then I have a comment.
Okay. Motion and a second, and Councilmember Fox.
I would like to speak to some of the landscaping as well. I know that is a very fast thoroughfare, Highway 4th Street, for all my residents up there. And especially when school gets out, it's really hard to keep traffic at bay, right? So I would love to see some beautiful shrubbery and beautiful structured plants, as long as they're maintained, so there's not distraction or anything that's getting into the street so that it's harder to see traffic from. So, thank you.
Councilmember Fox. Okay, there's a first and a second. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Well, I guess you can just continue with the resolution for the site plan at Regina Assisted Living Expansion at 1008 First Street West.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. Another site plan, a little bit different configuration here. Most of this is dealing with the parking lot, which I'll show you in a second. The rest of it is kind of the building underneath the building. So you can kind of see here that this section of Regina has an open bottom level on it, and then the second floor is where the first habitable area is. What they're proposing to do is to turn this into a more habitable space and then to create more parking within the development. So you can see the whole property here. This is First Street and Inninger Road. This is where they're going to be putting filling in the first floor area, for lack of a better word, small addition at this portion of the triangle, and then more parking over here. So they'll also be reconfiguring this parking area to serve as more of a drop-off area, as you see there. So there would still be a singular entrance that comes in to serve both properties. that would look something like this. This is the new parking. This is the building over here. And this is sort of what the new area would look like filled in. So we did take a look at this at Planning Commission on June 12th. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this unanimously with limited discussion. And so I can stand for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any, Councilmember Fox?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm so jazzed that we're going to have more parking because that gets very clogged up on First Street. I know residents are really worried about First Street as like a residential walkway. And sometime in the nearish future, First Street is on the docket to be revisited. And from the Public Works perspective, how will the entrance and exit to the parking lot be affected if we revamp First Street and maybe add a sidewalk, which I will advocate for starting now?
Okay. Well, council member, this kind of shows the general location of where the parking would be. This is the right-of-way line for First Street itself. So we've got room within the right-of-way to add sidewalk and trail, I think, along First Street here. And for most of the area, we might even be able to cheat into the site if we needed to do so. So from a room standpoint, what they're doing here should not negatively affect the ability to provide sidewalk and trail in the future.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. John, I have a question. Have they decided, are they designating that parking area for employees?
It's a good question, Mayor. I am not sure of that one, actually. I think the way that I would understand it, I think this would be more designed for employees because the main entrance is going to be over here. My hunch is that this would be more employee parking since this is further away from the public entry. So by taking the employee parking out here, there'd be more availability for guests. That would be what I would think.
Because that's who parks on First Street are the employees.
Okay,
I mean, for the most part, yeah.
great.
Okay,
So hopefully that'll cease.
yeah. Councilmember Pemble.
That's, in a sense, looking at it, to me, it's like, we need this, but the point about the sidewalk connection, somebody who walks in the area and it's like, okay, you're gonna be on the roadway, and as busy as First Street is, when the time comes for that chunk of roadway to be redone, we really need to look at adding that sidewalk on the north side to tie that all together so you can get over to Ninja Road and do it safely. Other than that, I think we move this ahead.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Motion by Pemble, second by Fox. Additional new discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Well, John, resolution property sale, northwest corner of Spiral Boulevard and Glendale Road.
Okay, council members and mayor may recall that we discussed this and held a public hearing last week about this property sale. So this is 5-acre property here is part of a larger piece of property the city owns, which goes to the south. I think I got another, I guess I don't have a map of that. That goes further to the south. Spiral Boulevard goes through the property here. So we have been approached by the owner of what's in yellow here, Richard Reese, to purchase this 5-acre portion from us, combine it with this property, and then subdivide this into 2 10-acre lots. The property itself is zoned agriculture. It's outside of the area which we anticipate extending utilities to, so it does have a 10-acre requirement, would be on well and septic. So what we have before you tonight is a resolution that tries to accomplish 3 things. One is it approves the disposition of the city property as required by the city charter. One of the things that we have to abide by per the city charter is to hold a public hearing before we dispose of property and to come up with some rationale as to why we're disposing of the property, which is included in the resolution. Frankly, we don't have a need for this, and we're being provided a market value for the property, so we are okay with both of those items. The other would be to approve the sale and purchase agreement with Northern State Service LLC. Northern State Service LLC is LLC established by Mr. Reese for ownership and plating of the property itself. Within that would be established the purchase price for the property, which would be about $60,000 altogether. The requirement to plat this property, which would mean to come forward with a preliminary and final plat in the future, which would combine these two lots and provide for two 10-acre lots, and also to plat the right-of-way for Spiral Boulevard, which is a very important thing for us. Right now, this area is just, the road for Spiral Boulevard just traverses across the property with no delineation between what is right-of-way and what is other land. With this agreement, we get the benefit of having that established within the right-of-way, and frankly, it's something that's done not at our cost, but to our benefit. So we are looking forward to that. The other part of the resolution approves the construction of an on-site sewer system. This is something that's directed within our city code, that any time an on-site septic system is constructed within the city limits, the council needs to authorize that. The rationale for approving this would be, this is an area of town that's outside of our metropolitan urban service area, an area that we have planned in future sewer extension. Frankly, we're not planning anything within here. So, and they've got adequate room to provide for their primary and secondary drain field. So we're all good with that. So that is what we're asking for the council to consider tonight, would be the resolution that would establish those three things. And I can stand for any questions.
Thank you, John. Council, discussion? Councilmember Leifeld?
Can all three of these be put into one motion?
Yes.
What's that?
They're already in one.
They're already in one?
Just adopt the resolution.
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution as written.
Okay,
Second.
and a second by, I didn't hear. Councilmember House? Okay, new discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Aye, oppose that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Well, John,
Last one I've got here.
you have another resolution for an
Do have another
Original
resolution.
Hastings Design Standards Review, home addition at 200 Maple Street.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and City Council members. So, resolution we have is for an OHDS Original Hastings Design Standards Review for 200 Maple Street, located at Maple Street and 2nd. So if you're looking at 2nd Street, this is the hill going upwards. Maple Street physically does not connect to 2nd because of the grade, so we're dealing with a lot of grade. You've got higher grade on 3rd Street that goes down to 2nd Street here. A little bit of background on the Original Hastings Design Standards. This is a portion of our zoning code which regulates the general form of buildings within the older portion of town, which is not within the historic designation district. And so it's not a review from historic parameters as far as we have our HPC review for conformity to a specific time period or something of significance with the home. That's not the case here. We do have the Heritage Preservation Commission review this because they're used to do their purview in dealing with design of buildings that fit within certain parameters. We do have them review it on that standpoint. So we did have the Original Hastings Design Standards review before the Heritage Preservation Commission on June 20th. They did vote 7-0 to recommend approval of it. There was a discussion on some of the triangular end windows and that they would not be in keeping with the design period for the OHDS, which is essentially from the beginning in 1845 until about 1940. But basically, that prior to 1940, homes did not have large triangular windows. But this is not a design item that we're looking at particularly under OHDS. This is something that we look at fitting a home per the OHDS requirements to other homes within the area. Let's take a look at what we've got here. This is the current view from Maple Street. This is the east side of the property just before you get to 2nd Street here. You can see there's some renovations going forward. When you're taking a look at this here, you can see it's a single-story home with 1.5 story here. They're going up to 2 stories, and the roof angle here is changing, so you're basically shifting the roof 90 degrees, so it would go, the roof gable, instead of going east-west, would go north-south. This is the picture here on Maple Street, that same image. So you can see there's a full second story added on there, so there is some height added to the building. The foundation itself goes out about another 4 feet. I'll kind of go back and forth here. So tuck under garage, building here, it would go up a little bit higher at this location for a second floor and be gabled in the opposite direction. So the long end of the building would still go north to south. Here's some of the triangular windows that the HPC was discussing on that. When we take a look at OHDS, we're taking a look at what we determine neighborhood average and really what's being provided within the immediate neighborhood. And we took a look at a couple of parameters on that. One was the height of the building itself. Most buildings are 23 feet tall. On average within this area, this one's 24 feet tall. We feel that that's close, it's very close to being that average, and within that average, there's nothing specifically says it has to be the middle of it. We believe that that is in keeping with the original Hastings design standards and regulations. The other is the foundation size of the building itself. The foundation size, even when widened on this one, would be about 1,670 square feet. The range that we have within the district is between 890 and 2,200, so it's within the range of that as well. So the important part of the original Hastings design standards is to ensure that a home is not out of proportion from neighboring homes within this immediate area. And from the research that we've done in looking at other homes, we believe that this is not out of the character for size and form of homes within the area, so we are recommending approval as well as the HPC on this. So I could stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, John. Councilmember Leifeld.
I cannot imagine how beautiful that view is going to be from the north side of that house. I don't know that I've ever really seen the north side of that house because of all the trees. But I imagine some of those trees will be trimmed, and that is going to be an absolutely beautiful gable. I would move to approve the recommendation for the OHDS as written.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Leifeld. Councilmember House. Seconds, additional new discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed to that motion state by saying nay. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, council, under administration, we have a resolution accepting council member resignation and declaring vacancy. For this item, we have an introduction by City Administrator Dan Waticha. Dan?
Sure. And thank you for adding this to the agenda. This afternoon, we received notice from Councilmember Trevor Lund about his resignation from City Council, effective July 10th. I've got the wrong date in the second whereas of the resolution, but the therefore at the end of it is correct. Anyways, indicating his resignation July 10th. He explained that in the 6+ years he's been on council, just he's at a different place in life now than he was before. His family's growing and getting a little bit older and more active. He's extremely busy with work, and it just limits his ability to give the attention that he would like to council, and so is resigning. Our city charter requires council to accept resignation with the formality of a resolution. So that's what is before you tonight and added to the agenda, as well as the officialness of declaring or recognizing that there is a vacant position on council. Expect that we will promptly begin advertising, hey, we've got a position. If you live in Ward 4 and you're interested and eligible, we'd like to hear from you. But we're going to need to figure, as a council, how do we handle that hiring process, so to speak. don't know what we'll get for interest, but our charter requires that council appoint an eligible resident within 30 days of the vacancy. So deadline is August 9th. That gives you 2 regularly scheduled council meetings, July 17th and August 7th. Otherwise, whether it's for interviewing or for a final decision or whatever it might be, some sort of special council meeting fit in there probably. So it's a fairly quick process. I'm glad we've got a couple weeks before that 30-day clock or a couple weeks before that 30-day clock starts, but it's going to go quickly because this is in the middle of budget and everything else, strategic planning and everything else that we're busy with. I certainly recognize tough decision for Councilmember Lund. Appreciate his years of service here, but really the point tonight is working that process and saying there's a vacancy and let's start advertising it. I can take any questions. But I think it really is fairly straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I do have a question. Is there a period of accepting nominations or applications, I should say?
There's
Special
not,
period?
there's not a special period. It's a matter of, from a practical standpoint, what works for us. You could say, I'm taking applications for the next 5 minutes, the next 5 hours, 5 days, probably not 5 weeks because you'll run out of time, but something in between those, figure a week and a half to 2 weeks. I'd hate to draw it out too long because we're going to have time to
Right.
process, review, when can we schedule a chance to meet if the full council's going to meet and do interviews. So I'm hoping that we can meet publication deadlines. They have it in the paper this week, but that's pressing up against their publication deadlines to get it to them first thing tomorrow. We'll certainly use social media, but if we take it for a week and a half, the holidays in the middle of that, so maybe 2 weeks. I don't have a calendar to know what that date comes out to, somewhere around the 10th. We could take applications and then see what we have for applications, if we need to extend it longer, or if we would then schedule interviews. I see a question down here.
Thank you. Councilmember Leifeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dan, just to confirm, this would be open to anyone within the community, not just Ward 4?
Ward 4.
This is the Ward 4
So
position.
even a replacement of that individual needs
The-
to be within that ward?
Correct.
And then they would finish out that term, which is through next year?
They would, until the next regular election, which coincidentally is the balance of this term. So through the end of '24.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Fulch.
I'm sorry, so just for clarification's purposes, the city will put forward an application for folks to fill out? Or do they just submit interest with a resume, or what's the application process going to be?
Really, it's a matter of saying, I live in Ward 4 and I'm interested. If we want something more substantial, some sort of resume or some sort of letter of interest explaining their qualifications or their interest, you can certainly expect more or request more. I would not have anticipated an application form, but I suppose that's an option too, but.
Your Honor, I would suggest that we do have some kind of application form, at least, even to be on one of the commissions, you have to fill out a little application. And I have to say, I've thought that those applications have been too vague for the most part. And so I would ask that, that someone should submit, why it is that they're interested and what they feel that their qualifications are, and, what community groups that they've been, involved with because I think that one of the most important things about being a council member is that you're really involved, within the community. And so I think that that's a super important component. And then I just wanted to also say that I'm really saddened that Councilmember Lund has stepped down. He has been a member of our team now for the past 6.5 years, and I have always valued his input. He's an incredibly intelligent person, and he's very articulate, and he will be sorely missed. And so I'm sorry to see you go, Trevor. So thanks. Thank you for all of your service. Bye.
Councilmember Pemble.
I think what we need to do is move forward with once the publication, if it can be posted out tomorrow, that as of a set date, 10 days, so it would bring it out to about, with the holiday in, 9th or 10th, something like that. And then it's a letter of interest, similar to what was mentioned before, with some notes of qualification and understanding and interest. And then, once that point is received and we, as a council, can review that and then have a meeting of evaluation or something like that so that we can move this forward and fill the vacancy.
Thank you, Councilmember Pemble. Councilmember House.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd also like to echo Councilmember Fulch's, pardon me, about the application. I would too like to see, involvement within different districts of our town in different groups on any applicants that do come through. Also, I do want to just say I appreciate Councilmember Lund's, service to our community. It takes a lot to be up here, and he has shown a great pride and great deal of strength with it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember House. Councilmember Leifeld.
I was going to wait and say something sappy when he was here, but then I noticed the agenda, and he won't be here for the next meeting. So I'll make sure to say something sappy personal to him when I see him, because he loves that sort of stuff. But that being said, I just want everyone to understand too that without having spoke to him, he definitely didn't make this decision quickly or abruptly. The first time I wanted to run for council, my children were in school, and I immediately, 10 days after applying, was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Get out of there. Don't do that. I was too busy with my kids, and I decided to wait, and I ran the first time when my youngest graduated from high school. So understanding where Trevor is with his family and his children, mad respect to be able to do that. And his not being here lately, I've been like, what is going on with him? Because this isn't Trevor. And so family does come first, even over your community service. So great job, Trevor, for making that decision and spending the time that you can with your family, because trust me, you're going to blink and they're going to be off away at school and having families of their own. So I'm really proud of him for making this decision, but I'm going to miss having him sitting here next to me. So thank you, Your Honor.
Now you're going to be the shortest of the council.
For the record, I already am shorter than Trevor, Councilmember Lund, so I was the shortest.
Okay.
But I'm going to be alone on the end of the picture all by myself.
Well, anytime there was a photo, anytime there was a photo, those two are on this end, pushing each other around, and so. Trevor, we will miss you. Tough decisions. I agree with everyone that said something up here. You have grown and you have given, and you will be missed, but your children will love having you with them. So, Councilmember Fox. Okay. We have a motion on the floor. We need a motion to accept. Thank you, Councilmember Pemble and Councilmember Fox. And additional new discussion, council.
I guess, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you. I would like to make sure that our process is thorough even through the interviews, that we as a team come up with some really thoughtful interview questions and make sure that we bring the people in for that process. I just thought it was valuable to mention the interview section of it as well as the application section, because I think that's going to be the toughest time for all of us. And however we can support you both, Dan and Mayor, please let us know, because we're on crunch time, so.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Fox. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Council, any announcements or updates or, okay, I have a few. City offices will be closed Tuesday, July 4th in observance of Independence Day. Appreciation to Hastings Golf Club for organizing a 4th of July parade at 7 p.m. from C's Church parking lot, then eastbound on 15th Street and ending at Westview Drive, followed by live music, then fireworks at 10 p.m. And applications to Vermilion Bank, in appreciation to Vermilion Bank and Hastings Golf Club for the fireworks. Summer rec programs at Levy Park, Tuesday, June 27th, performance in the park, Circus Science Spectacular, sponsored by Smead Manufacturing. Thursday, June 29th, music in the park with Gus Sent Me, Country Rock and Roll, supported by Ruth and George Doffing Charitable Fund. Thursday, July 6th, music in the park with String Showdown Variety, supported by Ruth and George Doffing Charitable Fund. Tuesday, July 11th, party in the park to celebrate National Park and Recreation Month with salsa music, food trucks, activity booths, caricature artists, inflatable balloon artists, climbing wall, free painting, and more. Wednesday, July 12th, story time in the park is food, recommended for ages 7 and under, a partnership with Pleasant Hill Library, supported by Ruth and George Doffing Charitable Fund. Thursday, July 13th, music in the park with Revved Up, hits from 90s to today, supported by Ruth and George Doffing Charitable Fund. Friday, July 14th, movies in the park with Onward, sponsored by Ardent Mills. Please bring a non-perishable food item. The Rec and Art and Police will be at Sunny Acres Park on Wednesday, July 12th, featuring nature weaving and relay games recommended for elementary and middle schoolers, supported by SC Toys, Country Financial, Hastings Lions Club, Hastings Family Service, Community Education, and Prescott Arts Council. Makerway Alley Market will be at the Levee on Thursday, July 13th. Support area makers and artisans with old historic downtown and riverfront park by shopping at their markets. Bike with a Ranger, bike the 10-mile loop, and learn history and wildlife fun facts on Saturday, July 15th, recommended for teens and adults, a partnership with the National Park Services. Registration is required. Happy birthday to Council Member Fulch.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Monday meetings coming forward. Monday, July 3rd is City Council is canceled. Monday, July 10th, 7 p.m. is a Planning Commission, 7 p.m. is a Utilities Committee meeting. Wednesday, July 12th, 6 p.m. in Arts and Culture Commission. Thursday, July 13th, 6 p.m. is a HEDRA meeting. Monday, July 17th, 5:30, City Council PFAS workshop and a 7 p.m. City Council meeting. And if I could just add, I'd love to just thank the sponsors of, George and Ruth Doffing, Smead's, Ardent Mills, SC Toys, all the sponsors that help create these events down at the river and at our parks, because without them, we could not do this. So thank you. And I would accept a motion to adjourn. Councilmember Leifeld, Councilmember Pemble. No discussion. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And we are adjourned.